Continuing the conversations from the preceding two sessions, we'd like to expand on the broader topic of education as a catalyst for development in Armenia. Our panel of distinguished guests will share a dialogue about the institutions that not only promote but financially support higher learning, with a primary focus on the Luys Foundation. I'm going to give a very brief introduction to all of you about the Luys Foundation. It was founded in 2008 under the patronage of the Armenian president Gevorg Sarkisian and the former Prime Minister Tigran Sarkisian. The Luys Foundation is a nonprofit scholarship organization that helps fund students of Armenian descent enrolled in the top 10 universities across the world. While not required to ultimately return to Armenia, scholarship recipients are obliged to partake in a month-long program under the rosy title of Develop Armenia Together, every summer between their academic years. In Armenia, scholars are asked to collaborate in hopes of developing solutions for present challenges in select rural and urban communities. Despite certain shortcomings, the program establishes a vast network that connects scholars with diverse backgrounds from around the world to think and engage with the broader topic of cultural preservation, a challenge that perhaps cannot be solved over a summer but necessitates long-term commitment. The network of Luys Scholars and alumni has since grown to somewhere close to 500, a swelling number that, while might precariously forecast what some refer to as brain drain, is perhaps more so a testament to the promising potential of the future generations. With that in mind, it is my great privilege to introduce Professor Dan Mazmanian. He's currently a professor here at USC Sol Price School of Public Policy, where he also served as the L. Piper Dean and Professor from 2000 to 2005. He is a founding director of the Bedrosian Center on Governance and an academic director of the USC Schwarzenegger Institute of State and Global Policy. Professor Mazmanian has been influential both domestically and internationally, serving as executive director of the report of the California Adaptation Advisory Panel to the State of California in 2009 and 2010, as well as a member of the Task Force on Environmental Governance on China Council for International Cooperation on Environment and Development. More recently, serving as a member of the Technical Assistance Team to the Government of the People's Republic of China. He will be joined in conversation by distinguished Luys Scholars and alumni, Rafi Mardirossian, Sareen Habeshian, Sanan Shirinian, Ari Sekeryan, and Gevorg Khandamiryan. So with that said, I pass the mic over to Dan Mazmanian.
Thank you very much, Paul, and it's a delight to be here today and to be on this panel with these bright young scholars. And I think to start off, I think for all those in the auditorium and those watching in, I'd like each of you to just take a couple of minutes to share with us something about your background and interests and what you're doing actually as a scholar today. So let's start with Rafi.
Hi, my name is Rafi Mardirossian. I'm 27 years old. I studied architecture at UC Berkeley for my bachelor's degree, after which I worked as an executive architect in Los Angeles for a couple years, and then pursued my master's in architecture at Harvard University's Graduate School of Design with the help of Luys, where I was simultaneously involved with both pursuing my academic interests and aspirations and remaining involved in a couple projects that we did with Luys simultaneously. And I think what I'm really interested in pursuing today and pursuing for the rest of my kind of professional career is how to simultaneously be able to manage my commitment to my disciplinary interests and simultaneously to a greater kind of broader Armenian cultural project.
Thank you. That's very good. Sanan.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Sanan Shirinian. I am born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I am a product of our Armenian school system here. I attended UCLA, earned my bachelor's degree there in 2011 in women's studies. And at that point, I had been to Armenia about 5 or 6 times already through different programs with school and AYF and Home Men. And I had decided that I needed to kind of understand the country a little more intimately. So I moved there for about a year where I worked at the Raffy Martirosyan Foundation. And we had various projects, but I spearheaded a mini-series about women in Armenia. After that experience, I was accepted into graduate school as a Luys Scholar at Columbia University, where I earned my master's degree in human rights. My focus there was social movements in Armenia and how social movements can impact social change. Upon graduating from Columbia, I began working as a Haitad teacher at Rose and Alex Pilibos Armenian High School. And my purpose there was really to reintroduce this concept of Haitad, the Armenian cause, in a broader human rights context to a new generation of Armenian Americans. Since then, since 2016, I've been working as the principal of Ari Sekeryan Armenian School in Orange County, California.
Thank you very much. Ari.
Hi, Parev. Can you hear me? Yep. My name is Ari Sekeryan. I'm from Istanbul. I was born and raised in Istanbul. In 2010, I got my bachelor's degree in Turkology Department of Istanbul State University. Then, where I had the chance to improve my language skills, particularly Ottoman language. And then in 2012, I got my master's degree from Boğaziçi University, where I had the chance to write a master thesis on Ottoman Armenian community. And in 2014, I got an acceptance from Oxford University to do a PhD in Armenian studies. At that moment, I searched for scholarships, and I found out the Luys Foundation online. So I thought that they wouldn't give me scholarship because since I was a citizen of Turkey, and I emailed them, they welcomed me, and they provided me scholarship. And now I'm doing a PhD at Oxford University, Faculty of Oriental Studies, writing a thesis on Ottoman Armenian community, mainly the armistice years, 1918-1923.
Thank you. Sareen.
Hi, my name is Sareen Habeshian. I'm also a product of LA Armenian schools. I was born and raised here. I attended UC Berkeley, where I majored in media studies and Armenian language and literature with a minor in Middle Eastern studies. Now I'm attending USC, doing my master's in journalism. During my time with Luys, by the time I reached that time, I'd been to Armenia various times, but with Luys it was my first time actually working in Armenia. I interned at IB Educational Foundation, the Armenian Ministry of Defense, and Teach for Armenia.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Gevorg Khandamiryan. I'm totally product of Armenian educational system, both the middle school, and my life changed when I got accepted to a very innovative and brand new high school called IB High School in Yerevan. The IB school, the high school, the 3 years of my high school gave me the real opportunity to open up to the different diverse experiences, and I tried myself in diverse fields, and the result was that I got accepted right after the high school into a University of California, Berkeley, and right now I'm earning my double degree in applied mathematics and economics in the University of California, Berkeley. I'm interested in finance and banking system in Armenia. I've done various internships in Armenia actually, and also I'm interested in Armenian culture. Right now I'm heading the dance group called Zartong in Berkeley, and we're going to have a very great cultural show. So the reason why I took that is that I want to spread Armenian culture both through dance and history, and the people who got born and raised in United States, so they can be more connected to their country.
Well, thank you. And this is just a brief introduction. There's more, of course, in the program of our very exciting young scholars. And of course, the benefits of the program to them, I hope, are fairly obvious in terms of being supported in their graduate work. But there's another question about the broader ambitions and goals of the scholarship itself. So how about let's us begin with you telling us about your experience as a scholar and how it's affecting you professionally, personally, and however else. And maybe we'll begin this with Sareen.
So during my time, I received the Luys Scholarship for 3 years at my time at Berkeley. And during those summers with the Develop Armenia program, we spent a month volunteering. So I worked at, as I mentioned, the IBE Foundation, the Ministry of Defense, and Teach for Armenia. And I think the biggest impact this had for me was realizing that this romantic notion that we as diasporans often have of impacting change in Armenia isn't necessarily as easy as we think. By going in there for 2 weeks, we can't really create lasting change, and it's a much bigger commitment, a very possible commitment, but it's not something that we could just go in for 2 weeks and think we're going to change everything and improve everything. So
you can't just parachute in and change the world.
Exactly.
Well, that's a reality that we all have to deal with, and we are trying to. Rafi.
Yeah, to second what Sareen said, I think what was interesting for me that I gained out of the Luys program was it transformed this idea of working in Armenia and for a broader Armenian project from this abstract notion that it's possible to actually a very concrete reality. And I think this goes for, I think, a couple of us on stage. I had been to Armenia before I went with the Luys program, and as a tourist, you have a completely different experience than you do with the Luys program. I think the greatest potential that Luys gives us is understanding that there is a new generation of like-minded thinkers, people who want to explore different avenues, different disciplines in a kind of global perspective. And I think understanding that gives you the ability to have a greater vision as to your involvement and your position within creating this global Armenian network and working to advance your discipline in not such an isolated way, but more of a kind of global way.
I appreciate your observations, and in fact, I want to return to that, but first we're going to ask for comments from others. Go on.
It's one thing to learn in the university about different concepts, and it's another thing to apply them in a community which really needs it, a community like Armenia. And Luys Foundation is very good in the terms of that. Before Luys, I was attributing my own achievements to only me, but after Luys, I started to view my own perspective, not individualistically, but more community-based. So I started to attribute the things that I learned in the university as a way to develop my country and the community, as a way to contribute in some way to it, to the development of Armenia. And it's really interesting because throughout the year, people are studying in various universities, and during a month, they are coming and collaborating open-mindedly. They are collaborating and are really exposed to real-life problems in Armenia, which they aren't exposed in the United States or in other countries. So they try to see what kind of solutions they can propose for that problems.
I'm going to continue on this because we're getting some interesting comments, but Ari, how are you seeing it affecting your life, your profession?
After I got Luys Fellowship, Luys Scholarship, I established networks in Armenia with Armenian, Armenian professors, professors of Armenian studies. So before Luys, for me, it was impossible to connect with the Armenian academia in Yerevan and in Armenia. But after I attended the DAT program, Develop Armenia Together program of Luys Foundation during the summer of 2016, and I met with the professors of Armenian Studies, Armenian History, and we established connections, and we are planning to organize workshops in Armenia and conferences in Armenia regarding Armenian history and literature.
Sanan, I think you gave us a hint when you explained what you were doing earlier about your background, but tell us how this has made, the scholarship has affected you.
Well, to be completely honest, it wasn't the Luys program specifically that helped me connect with Armenia, because I had had so many experiences, and that's just how I had been raised and how I had felt before the program. But it was a wonderful opportunity to, gain support for my career in academia. However, one important element I think that Luys shed light on for me personally was that it helped me understand that Armenia wasn't just this distant country where it's a bucket filler and from the diaspora we just send checks and write donations and help Armenia develop from a distance. Luys was Armenia helping a diasporan financially, so that was a big shocker and a big reality check where it's more of a partnership rather than a superior constantly donating to this developing distant country.
interesting perspectives, of course, from our recipients of the scholarship. I must say that the purpose, as I understand, of the scholarship isn't simply to help you, although it does help you, and it isn't simply about you per se. At least that's as I understand its goal. And in that context, how do you see yourself as, if you will, ambassadors for Armenia and Armenians in this new global world that we're entering, where we are living around the planet, you're communicating around the planet, and it's your coming generation, not those of mine, that is actually going through this. So I think it would be helpful for all of us to understand how you, as these upcoming academic, scholarly leadership, see yourselves as ambassadors for this transformation, this innovation of Armenia. And let's just go down the line. Rafi, let's begin.
Yeah, I think that question is very important because I think it targets what is the most important outcome of Luys, which is creating a network of Armenians which are aspiring towards, kind of the greatest institutions in the world, but also leading innovation in respective fields. And I think for me what's been interesting is being able to both promote discipline that I am attached to, architecture, but simultaneously within that realm inject conversations about Armenia and within the academic realm while I was at Harvard, but also within my professional kind of experience. And so I think that's something that Luys does almost without effort. It creates this community, this network of, as Paul stated, 500 scholars who are doing their respective things in their respective fields, in their institutions and in their professions. And I think that's a testament to our role as ambassadors, simply by that interaction.
So you want us to appreciate the amplification.
Exactly.
Okay. Sorry.
Similarly for me, I already had that connection, I think, to Armenia before I started with Luys. The first year I went for Luys, I had already been to Armenia 15 times. Although Luys gave me a completely different experience in Armenia, I think that global community we really have now is an extraordinary gain from Luys, because you spend a month every single day with scholars from some of the most elite universities in the world, and you build a real connection with them. And now you have friends and I guess some colleagues in all of these schools that you can always reach out to.
Well, a question to you, following up on this, but what Rafi said also, but for everyone. So are you actually connecting with these this network of 500 of others and beyond them about the future?
Yes, I think so. We all really become friends. It's more than just a professional relationship. So I really feel like these are people that later in life, you can reach out to if, you need something or you have something to offer. Whenever we go visit like a different state or a different place in the world, we often connect with those people we met during the Luys summer program.
To also give a concrete example of what Sareen is explaining, we met a fellow colleague who studied architecture at Columbia on our Luys DAT program, and we ended up doing an architecture competition with him. So there is concrete evidence of the way that the network that it creates is able to spawn ingenuity and spawn new projects going forward.
Ari.
Well, I feel myself as an ambassador because as a young scholar of Armenian history, wherever I go to present my paper, present my article, which is on my research, mainly armistice period, people keep asking like questions about the general, who are the Armenians, general questions about Armenian history, Armenian culture and literature, and I suddenly found myself, introducing Armenian culture, literature, and history, which is not my, field of expertise actually. For instance, last week I was in Berlin. People asked, questions on questions on Armenian culture and history. And next week I will be in London to attend another conference, and I'm sure that people will ask questions on who are the Armenians in general, general questions.
You've touched on something you didn't bring up earlier when I asked you how it's influencing you, but you actually just told us something I think really profound, which it is compelling you to learn about your Armenian history. And to share that with people around the world who don't know. You're not the first to be asked, what does it mean to be an Armenian? Where is Armenia? What does it mean? You know, why do you have an IAN or YAN in your name? It's true for all of us. But the fact is that when you're asked questions which you feel obliged to answer, you're learning much more than your specific topic, and the scholarship is having a much greater impact than I suspect any of us would have thought about if you'd asked at the beginning. So I think that's very important for all of us, and I hope it's the case with all 500 of the scholars. Sanan.
Well, I think that this concept of global Armenian identity, global Armenian culture, it's become a real trendy concept, and it's like these phrases we're hearing more often. And I would just question, what does that actually mean? Like, what is global Armenian culture? You know, is it our Christian faith? Is it our language? Is it possibly the Armenian genocide? But these are all contentious rallying points. So I think that's something that we can have a conversation around and help define. But more importantly, I would caution myself to assume that I can represent or speak on behalf of global Armenians, because that's such a vast, diverse group of people. So more importantly, I would want to kind of empower local Armenian communities to become their own ambassadors. So here at USC today, we have all of these great initiatives. We're talking about excellence and innovation. And I think that that can really exist on a foundational, like local, basic level. And in my capacity as principal today, for example, I am an ambassador, I suppose, by helping second, third, fourth generation Armenian American youth in Orange County, 7,000 miles away from Armenia, kind of discover and celebrate their Armenian identity, whatever that might mean to them. So.
You know, you've touched on an issue that's not just about Armenian and Armenians, it's about the global community, which is, what does it mean to be part of the global community? I'm glad you're bringing that up, because part of it is about technology and communications and linking, and the other part about is working with people on the ground in every walk of life. So that's important. Gevorg.
Yeah, first of all, adding to what Sareen said, the DAT program, the Develop Armenia program, is the basis of our network. It's the way we start collaborating with each other, making the connections and network. And many of the DAT projects are right now very successful companies in Armenia. So it's the foundation of starting a very big global network, both with Armenians living in Armenia and diaspora Armenians. And what I view as Luys is the way I think is that Luys invests in the future of Armenia in a way that, from my example, I can tell as a person who grew up in Armenia for all his life and just moved to UC Berkeley a year ago, I can see many things, I can experience many things which I don't experience in Armenia. And sometimes I get really angry, why don't we have all those things in Armenia? Why don't we have so much opportunities for Armenian people or other things? But what Luys gave me is the opportunity to be exposed to all these experiences in the United States in terms of both education and networking, and to bring all those experiences back into Armenia after some period of time. So we can view Luys as an investment, both as we can view ourselves both as ambassadors, and we can view ourselves as investment into the future of Armenia. We are sort of opening up to the world, taking the experience of it, and then we are taking all those experiences back into Armenia, investing in it, so that the world knows about Armenia, actually. And also thinking about the culture, as an ambassador of culture, from my example, I can tell, as a person who is way more exposed to the Armenian reality, I always try to share my experiences with people and students at UC Berkeley and other universities who don't know about the Armenian life, to share my experiences about the Armenian culture, just as I talked about the dance. So a lot of people are really interested in dance, and I see how Glendale students, for example, Glendale Armenian students, are really excited every time to come to the dance practice, to learn much more about the Armenian culture, to get to experience actually the Armenian culture, because they have never experienced it before.
Another important dimension which hadn't been brought out about this, but it's about communications and arts and science and dance and play, is all part of creating a culture. So that's important. Well, you know, you really are a part of the elect few who are fortunate enough to receive this kind of scholarship to pursue your own academic world. And as you've all explained, it's affecting you and hopefully also expanding this global community's reach to one another. And the 500 are wonderful ambassadors in that sense. But 500 in a global population may not be enough. So my question to you is really to reflect on the program itself. And do you have thoughts and visions on how it could expand, how it could approach things in a better way, how it can be more effective both for Armenia and Armenians? Both, because there's really that dual purpose here that we can hear coming through your comments and is embedded in the program. So maybe we just start, and I'm going to go just down the line again, but since Rafi's next to me, we'll start here and move on down. Rafi.
Yeah, I think, of course, we all know that Luys is a fantastic program and it has given us the potential of, achieving our dreams in a sense. But I think we should be very keen on making sure that we are pushing Luys in the direction that it should be going in. And ultimately, Luys's greatest asset is a long-term investment. It's the investment that people who are coming out of these great institutions will eventually get to places of influence that will start then trickling back in a more productive manner back into Armenia. And that, I think, also, for instance, the DAT program, the summer program that we talked about, there's many ways of actually improving that so that the kind of impact that we make is better geared towards the things that we are skilled at. At the moment, I think there is an underutilization in the summer program, and I think there's a lot of potential to kind of improve that summer program.
To add to what Rafi said, I think every organization has its flaw, and the flaw of Luys, I think, is all the ambition it has is limited and it's capped to that summer program, which, in 2 to 3 weeks, these big projects and big ideas you have, they can't really be done in that time. So maybe creating a more long-term, lasting program or way to interact, because, you can't solve the smoking problem in Armenia in 2 weeks, sitting in a village somewhere.
So let me press you on that point, on both of you, because you both said it. So what if the program involved going back to Armenia for 5 years? Repeating the experience on the ground in a way, and with some continuity.
Well, I think there needs to be some sensitivity to the global era that we live in. I mean, I think that it's unrealistic to imagine that everybody part of Luys would go to Armenia for 5 years, whether if that's what you want to do. I actually have friends who are Luys Scholars who have moved to Armenia and pursued startup companies there. And I think if it's left to the free will of the individual, it's done with much more comfort and without being pressured into doing that. But simultaneously, I think that it's possible if there's an infrastructure, a platform that is created by Luys that is kind of maintained throughout the course of the year, and actually after your tenure as a Luys student. I think it's very important that the end of Luys doesn't mean the end of your involvement with the Luys community. I think that's a major kind of issue that needs to get worked out.
And, I'm a big advocate of repatriation to Armenia. I see that for myself in the future, but I don't think you can, by giving a scholarship to students, have that be a requirement that, oh, you have to go live there because we gave you this scholarship. I think that's something that is a personal choice and can't be, mandated on you.
Armenia is a landlocked country. If you type, on Google landlocked country, the first country that appears is Armenia. So borders are closed, the trade rate is so low. And I think that the only solution for Armenia is to invest in education and in technology, and Luys invests in education. And I think Luys should continue to invest in education to create a new, young generation of scholars from all around the world and from all fields.
Oh, I echo all of their sentiments, and I would just add that I think that individual success very rarely leads to state development. Not never, but I think very rarely. And so the challenge now lies to take these individual success stories of Luys Scholars and really plug their potential into Armenia's institutions so that they can meaningfully contribute to the state development, because ultimately that's what we're looking at here. that is the most urgent need of our nation right now, is to develop the state of Armenia. So rather than kind of expecting Luys Scholars to casually volunteer their summer, just as they had mentioned, I think there needs to be a more institutionalized approach in kind of harnessing talents and successes into meaningful state development opportunities. And I want to urge all our scholars, not just Luys Scholars. I mean, we're nothing special here. So it's really a sense of urgency for all Armenian youth, all Armenian scholars, to really, in whatever it is they're studying, somehow harness that potential and plug it into Hayastan.
I really agree with what you said, and I really think the main goal should be the long-term impact, not the short ones. Of course, short-term impact should be very connected with the long-term one, but Luys Scholars should more concentrate on the long-term impact, because it's what's going to develop the country way faster. Not in long term, but it's going to be influence the country and the nation, society in way better ways. I would suggest maybe the scholars should contribute more to the public by maybe taking them into separate companies and trying to use their knowledge and their resources in a way that will be beneficial to whole society, not very small societies. And I would maybe suggest also working in larger groups so that there is a wide range of fields and knowledge so that students can utilize their knowledge in more broader ways.
So what I'm hearing is that the scholarship has helped you. You have networked. It's part of a transformation underway, but you're not quite sure where it's going to lead. That we need to think about institutionalizing these relationships in a more effective way for both Armenia and Armenians. So it's the state of Armenia, the people in Armenia, but the broader worldwide community of Armenians. And if I just may observe, given that I've watched transformations in the past, you're the end of a first decade of an experiment. And what you're calling for is probably what the next decade needs to think about, which is now how do we go beyond this good work, these very bright young people, and molding a whole new culture and community. So I think that's very important. And I know we're going to just have a second, but any other comments you'd like to make? You have the stage. Anyone?
I mean, I would just add that there's often this fear of, and hesitation of, we can't move to Armenia. We're born and raised here. We're used to this comfortable lifestyle, a certain level of, a certain standard of living, but it's not one or the other. It's not black or white. We're not talking about you either move to Armenia and you live there permanently or you're useless to the Armenian nation. It's really a revolving door. It's that connectivity is so much more, how can am I able to explain myself the right way? Where it's really a constant back and forth where you're not either there or here.
It's vague, very well.
Well, I must say, I'm inspired by all of you, and you actually do give me hope about the future. And I think everyone in the audience thinks the same, so let's give them a round of applause.